there's a pretty good chance that the number of manhwa or webtoon anime adaptations will increase in the coming years, and better yet, have a lot more traction thanks to the success of the Solo Leveling anime. And while Solo Leveling I think still remains as one of my favourite manhwas, I certainly wouldn't call it the best, with this other story being my favourite ongoing manga and I would say third favourite all time for me, combining a ton of different genres and story elements to create something so entertaining and engaging that out of all of the manga and manhwa I read weekly, it's one of my most anticipated of the week. Like reading a book before the movie is released, a reverse isekai is actually a surprisingly fitting summary of Omniscient reader's viewpoint. So the story goes like this. We follow an office worker called Kim Dokja through a post-apocalyptic Korea after the world is turned upside down with these hellish scenarios, where he quickly realizes that this nightmarish situation follows the events of his favorite web novel, Ways of Survival, or 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse, which he is the sole reader of. Thus the reverse isekai remark, he didn't enter the story but the story entered the real world, and we follow his journey through it as the only person with the knowledge of what comes next. And with that, I think Omniscient Reader succeeds on all 3 fronts of plot, character and themes, and just like the best of stories, it goes deeper than you might initially think. And starting with none other than the protagonist, well, the protagonist of this story but not that story. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about if you've read it. He is a great main character to this story because as important as he is being the only person knowledgeable of future events and how strong he is able to grow because of that, you never really view him as overpowered because his thoughts and his actions are rational, realistic, in a world where death is lurking around every corner. So his character with all of its intricacies fits perfectly into this story. He isn't wrong in what he chooses to do and the overall vibe from him is a good one, but Kim Dokja is far from being morally good, since he has 2 sides to consider: what to do with the information that he knows and what to do with those around him, who are a mix of real people and characters from the web novel. It's his cunning and his wits that set him apart from the rest, and also being a walking spoiler doesn't hurt his chances either. The difficulties faced, every challenge is thrown at him and the characters headfirst, and while Dokja might not always be smiling, he's not panicking for the most part. Reading any story or any piece of fiction is all about escapism, finding joy that you can't find in your normal life, and you often hear of people saying a specific story saved them or gave them something they didn't have before. It's kind of like that with Kim Dokja, where as a mundane office worker, that web novel was his escape. Also his name, it literally translates to reader or lone child. Now I don't think he was envisioning himself fighting for his life 24/7, but you can clearly see his enthusiasm for the original story with the way he interacts with this new world and the characters. It's never a dull moment when he is on the page, and he is a great lead for the story. And then looking beyond him to those other characters, his companions get their own times to shine. They each have a unique personality and relationship with Kim Dokja that take away their appearances, and they are just as distinguishable from one another. They have their own specialties and traits, and they grow in their own way as well. Although there is one clear standout here who is the true protagonist of this story, the protagonist of 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse, Yoo Jung-hyuk, the quote-unquote real main character. He has essentially been Dokja's emotional support since he began reading the novel, so Dokja will obviously have this great admiration for him, but the greatest aspect of Jung-hyuk's character is his demeanour. While you've got this former office worker both terrified and thrilled by his new surroundings, Yoo Jung-hyuk shows that when this horror is all you've ever known, there's nothing to smile about and you just need to autonomously keep moving, even in circles, to just try and get out. He is the real overpowered edgelord protagonist, but one with infinite weight on his shoulders because the story has refused to give him even an inch when it comes to, well, anything that's not absolutely horrible. And talking of the story, I haven't really gotten into that much apart from the web novel coming to life. One of my favourite aspects of the story is its implementation of the game or screen system. something that is definitely overused in the manhwa webtoon industry nowadays. So who knows, maybe it's just luck that Omniscient Reader was one of the first ones I had read. But the reason why I love it so much is because of the ongoings behind the screens. Each challenge our characters faced is called a scenario that they must overcome to progress the story, all in the star system, a broadcasting system used to display each one of these scenarios and their struggles, with it all being the handiwork of the dokebis, fuzzy horned goblins. It's just that it's so nice to actually know what's going on behind the scenes and how it all works, because it only adds to the grandeur and the world building of the story, rather than the usual where the intricacies of the screen system aren't really touched upon too much until later on. And on top of that, the scenarios are streamed to beings called the constellations. I am a sucker for just any larger than life figures in a story, which is why the trope of the badass old guy character is one of my absolute favorites. So part of the story being built upon myth and legend, this is right up my alley. The constellations are who watch the streams, and they are very powerful, consisting of those immortalized throughout humanity's history, from historic heroes all the way up to the ancient gods of mythology. And they serve as a great third party to the story as a collective far beyond the reach of our characters, but also very closely tied to them since they play a part in the progression of said characters. It's all this that give the game or screen system actual definition. It's a defined aspect of the story. I'm sure there are some mysteries, many mysteries surrounding these things that I, as a manhwa reader and not a light novel reader, don't know about yet, but this is a system that is both explained well and serves its purpose very well. And add to that how this helps immensely with the world building, mixing mythology, history. It's such a cool concept that these figures, be them fictional or real, are given life in such a way thanks to their fables or their stories. Essentially, the legacy they left behind is what gives them their current status in the story. And there's definitely a metaphor in there somewhere with the way that they watch the suffering of others on their high perch through the star system. And the art is majestic, just so unbelievably clean, detailed. It's done by the same studio, Red Eye Studio, who also did the art for Solo Leveling, so there's no doubt that this art is just incredible. And purely from that name recognition of the studio, you know, even if you haven't read it, it's going to look insane. It still seems so surreal to me how weekly manhwas have art of this consistency and quality. More specifically, it's produced by Red Eye Studio, and the team of artists, to give them their credit, go by the name of Sleepy C. I'm not sure on the actual number of how many people there are working on it, but given that they are the people behind the art for some of the studio's biggest names, I assume there's a sizable amount. But regardless, it's still stunning. Every chapter has panels that are wallpaper worthy. It's so good, and the level of art complements the story so well. Looking over the entire story, up to the latest chapter of the manhwa, without getting into any major spoilers, I still can't really pinpoint any specific moment in the story that clears the rest of it in terms of storytelling. Like, there are points that are definitely better than others, but what I'm trying to say is that the story remains incredibly consistent with its quality of writing throughout its entire run. In my opinion, of course, there isn't a section of the story that has any major dip in quality that will take you out of the story. So just read it if you haven't. I will submit that there are points where the pace of the story slows, and depending on how quickly one decides to consume the series, be it binge reading or bit by bit, maybe their experiences will differ ever so slightly, but I don't think that's a big enough reason for someone not to at least give the series a go. Of course, there's always the chance that you won't like it. The series just isn't for you, which is perfectly fine, same as any other story, but to me, it just has so much going for it, and who knows, maybe it will also get an anime adaptation of its own following the success of Solo Leveling, and this may be very optimistic, and it may also hinge on the success of the second season of Solo Leveling, but I predict an anime for this story to be announced within 2 years. It deserves one. It deserves a proper adaptation, because I don't mean to keep bringing up Solo Leveling again and again, but where that story falls or falters, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint excels at. I think it's just that good.